All right, so in this video, I'm going to be showing you how we systematically scale our Facebook ad accounts for our different info product clients. We have used it to scale from 0 to 1K a day, 0 to 20K a month, and every single time we use this strategy, it works. Now, this is for, like I said, info product clients, e-commerce, stuff like that. That's not my area of expertise. I imagine a lot of the principles could be used for those different businesses. But this is especially effective for info product clients who are generating leads that then turn into either a customer or a phone call for the coaching program. So I don't want this video to go on too long, so I'm going to try and speed through as I go. There'll probably be some controls below that you could maybe put this video on like 1.5x speed, just so you can speed through any of my pauses as I go through and explain any of this stuff. So there's a 4-part process that we use to scale our Facebook ad accounts. So number 1 is audience farming. Number 2, creative testing. Number 3, demographic optimization. And then number 4, CBO for scale. So I'm going to be running through each of these individually right now. So audience farming. So first thing we do is basically our main goal with an ad account, especially if it's got no data in it previously, then our first goal is to find the best audiences for that offer or that product. If there's previous data in the ad account, we can use some of the previous data to understand which audience works best, but we still start with this process and then we just pick the best performing audiences that have worked previously with some more tests of our own. But this works just as well if it's just a brand new ad account and there's no data. So how do we set it up? We have one campaign, which is basically the audience farming campaign. And each ad set within that campaign has one interest. It's important that it is just one interest. What I see a lot of people do is they try and inside one ad set, they have like 4 or 5 different target interests. And it's like, what the heck are you doing? Like if that works, you don't know why it worked. It could have been one of the 5. Like one of the 5 could have performed really well and the rest could suck. But you don't know which one works because you put them all in the same ad set. The same if it flops and doesn't work, you don't know which one is like the worst performing one. So, super important. Each ad set has one interest or one audience inside of it. All the other variables are constant. So, age, demographic, country, placements, all that sort of good stuff, they all stay the same. The only different variable in this entire ad set or this entire campaign are the interests that are in each individual ad set. Now, depending on the budget of the client, we typically start with at least 5 to 10 ad sets. So one campaign, 10 ad sets. Each ad set is exactly the same, but it has a different target interests. Now, within each ad set, it has 3 images per ad set. So the same piece of copy, 3 different images inside one ad set. And those images and that one piece of copy are exactly the same throughout the 10 different ad sets. Okay, and that's basically where we farm our audiences. So we let this run for, depending on the budget and what you set it at, typically we start at $5 a day, especially if it's for a lead campaign. So if you're getting leads for like a VSL, you're getting leads for a webinar, they have to opt in with their name and email address. We start at $5 a day and we let that campaign run for about 3 days. Right, and throughout the 3 days, if after the first 24 hours or 48 hours, some of the ad sets haven't even got like a click or anything like that, then of course we can turn them off. But typically, like if they're getting clicks, some people opting in, some aren't, we basically let it run to 3 to 4 days. Then after that period, we then have our best performing interests. Now, hopefully out of the 10, you've got at least 3 or 4 or hopefully 5 that are working. If none of them work, then we basically do the same again. We might change like the images or the copy if there's literally no reaction from the marketplace. But what you can do, maybe if we have 2 or 3 that work, then we would maybe do that campaign basically again and test 10 more different interests until we have like maybe 4, 5 or 6 audiences that we know are working well. And then once we have the audiences that are working well, we start to optimize with creative testing. So we basically create a new campaign with the best performing interests. All the other variables are still constant, so it's still same country, age range, placements, all that sort of good stuff, they're all the same. But we have one campaign that is basically an image test. So we've tested 3 images here. We find which image worked the best, and then we find 3 other images that are similar to that image because that image worked. And then we would create a new campaign where we do basically an image test where we have 3 other images that are similar to the best performing image, and we run those to see if we can hyper optimize and get even better conversions. We would also run a new campaign that is basically a video test. So typically we test with 3 images first. Images usually create some form of like production quality, so we don't want to start testing with that in the beginning. But we basically get our clients to film a video ad, and we would have had a campaign that would use the best performing interest. Like it would be the exact same campaign as this, but instead of testing images, we test video. Pretty self-explanatory. And then we would do a copy test. So we have the best performing images here. We would put those into a new campaign, and we would test 3 different pieces of copy that was different to the one that worked here. So now we've got our best interests, and now we are trying to mess around with the creative and the messaging and the copy to see which one resonates most with the best performing interests. And again, same rule, we literally let these campaigns run for 3 to 4 days. You're not going to have 10 ad sets in these because maybe 10 out of 10 work with this test, which would be cool. But typically you're going to get like 50% of them work, 50% of them don't. So typically we find the best performing ones, which is around 50%. So in each of these will probably be around 5 ad sets each. Now, once you've let this run, and now we know what interests work the best, we now know what creatives work the best. So maybe one of these images work the best, maybe this video work the best. We know which copy worked the best. Now we want to optimize for demographics. So this is basically like hyper optimization. You could do this part and you could scale and it would still work extremely well. Now this is getting into the nitty gritty and really like hyper optimizing the entire campaign. So what we would do here, say for example, if 4 out of the 5 ad sets in this campaign was working well, we would duplicate those 4 best performing ad sets and we would put them into a new campaign, and we would basically test one of these. So we might do Facebook feed only. Or we would do, hey, it's working in the US, we would target Canada, or we target the UK or Australia, or we would test the gender. So we basically picked the best performing ones out of these campaigns, and we would duplicate them into another optimization campaign. And we would at the ad set level, we would change it to be, Facebook feed only, Canada only, age range could be like 25 to 35. And again, you would analyze the data, right? So you would look in here and have a look which ages are reacting best to this ad. And the video ad might flop, right? So it could be this one is the best performing, or maybe this piece of copy is the best performing, whatever it is, right? You've got to pick the best, what's performing the best, and then we try and hyper optimize that. So typically we would have like 4 or 5 different demographic optimization campaigns that are basically testing the best placements, countries, age, and genders. And there's a few different things you can do, but there are the 4 main ones. Now, this brings the end to basically our testing phase. So this is basically 3 different stages of testing. But at this point right now, we've got the best audiences, we've got the best creatives and copy, and we've got the best demographics. And now we're ready to scale. And whilst we're doing all of this, we could still be doing more of these audience farming campaigns. Like we started off with 10, but if we've got the budget and it's working well, we can test another 10 and another 10, and we can try and get as many audiences as possible. And basically the flow stays the same, because obviously we can still be scaling some campaigns, but we're still in the background testing audiences, testing creatives, testing demographics. So like this process doesn't stop, it's a continuous. Now, once we've tested and we've got some good results from our testing campaigns, now we're ready for scale. So we use strictly CBO for scaling, especially at speed. You will need to use CBO for scale. So what do we typically do? We find which testing campaign had 3 to 4 winning ad sets inside of it. I don't typically take one good ad set from here, one good ad set from here, one good ad set from here, and one good ad set from here. Like I want at least 3 to 4 to be from the same testing campaign, because that way we know that it's proven. Because like each of these could have like one best performing ad set, but it's not really proven. If like 99 of the ad sets fail with these pieces of copy, then I would say the pieces of copy aren't good. So like, there's no point picking, like, if we've got one good one in each of these, then something's off. We need more proof that it's got scalability in it and it's not just maybe like a one-off or lucky ad set. So within these testing campaigns, whichever one it is, I like them to be 3 to 4 winning ad sets at least in one of these testing campaigns individually for us to start scaling that. Because also as well, you could have like one interest. Say for example, we're in a marketing campaign and it's like Russell Brunson, right? It's a very obvious targeting interest. Maybe Russell Brunson's worked in this one, he worked in this one, he worked in this one, and he worked in this one. But I'm not going to pick 4 Russell Brunson audiences and put them in a CBO by themselves. Because like, they're only really targeting one interest. There's no scalability there. I really want 3 to 4 different audiences to put into one CBO, right? So 4 different audiences inside this one, and we would take the best 3 to 4 and we would duplicate it into a CBO campaign, right? You duplicate the 3 to 4 best performing ad sets into a CBO campaign. Now that CBO campaign, the budget is going to be dependent on your current stats. So for example, and this is a whole new lesson in itself to understand how the algorithm works and the auction works, but you want the budget large enough that it exits the learning phase. And to exit the learning phase, it needs at least 50 conversions in a 7-day window. Now, if we're optimizing for leads, I mean, in the US market, you're going to get Facebook ad leads for like $5, right? So it doesn't have to be a huge budget. So you want it to be big enough that the campaign is going to get more than 50 conversions in a 7-day period. So whatever your average lead cost is here, out of all these campaigns, whatever the average lead cost is, you want to times that by 50, and that's going to be at least your starting budget for the CBO on a daily basis, or over a 7-day period, sorry. But what you also don't want it to do, you don't want it to be big enough that Facebook sees you put a huge budget behind this campaign, and then Facebook's going to think to you like, he's going to think, oh, well, this guy doesn't really care about like the cost. Like, they've got a huge budget, we're just going to try and spend the money as much as possible. So like, just to give you an example, for when we scale these ad accounts, the most we will ever have a CBO is $200 a day. Unless we've got like a last minute push that we need to spend budget, or we don't really care about the cost because it's super profitable, we could, like, you know, if we wanted to do like a last 24-hour push, we may use like a CBO for like $1,000 a day. But like over a prolonged period of time, I would never have a CBO that is $1,000 a day. I mean, most of the time it's $100, honestly. Again, depending on what the average lead cost is, that is going to determine that. But for most of our clients, the CBO goes up to about $100 a day. It can go up to 200, but for the most part, 100 is a good amount where we've still got some scalability in the account, because, you know, $100 a day, you could have like 10 CBOs, right? And that's obviously $1,000 a day, so it's 30 grand a month. So you can scale up pretty quickly with $100 a day CBOs. But it's not too big that Facebook's going to go like, oh, this guy doesn't care about his budget, we're just going to spend all of his money. So again, just to reiterate, the budget needs to be large enough that it gets out of the learning phase, but low enough that you still get the lowest cost in the auction. Because again, if you give Facebook a $2,000 a day budget on a CBO, they're not going to try and get you a good place in the auction. They're just going to give you the most expensive placements because they're like, this guy's got a huge budget, right? So that's the most important part of scaling, is getting the budget calculation right. Now, what we typically do for these CBOs, we run them for 24 hours. The first 24 hours is a scary place if this is the first time you're doing this, because the results will suck. Like typically, if we're getting in the testing phase, if we're getting leads for like $5, it's not uncommon for that first 24 hours of the CBO running at $100 a day that we get a few leads, and our lead cost could be like 20 to 30 bucks. Now, what you're going to want to do as soon as you see that after like 12 hours in, you're going to want to turn off the campaign because you're like, wow, this is way too expensive. But you need to give the campaign, the CBO, time to optimize and find the best people. After 24 hours, that average cost per lead of the campaign for the CBO will start to come down. Unless it doesn't, after 24 to 48 hours, if it's still like $20, $30, $40, $50 and your previous lead cost was $5, then yes, of course, turn it off. But typically what we find is that in the first 24 hours, the lead cost could like double or triple or quadruple, whatever it is. But after 24 to 48 hours, after that second day, it usually comes down to a pretty good price, as long as obviously the messaging and the offer is right. So that's super important. You don't touch it. Like literally launch the CBOs, then don't look at the ad account for another day, because you're going to want to turn it off, or you're going to want to start turning like individual ads off and all that sort of good stuff. That's not what you want to do. And you can have multiple of these, right? So like throughout your testing, if you've got loads of these campaigns that have got 3 to 4 good ad sets within them, then, you know, you can have multiple CBOs. That's how we scale. Now, another kind of bonus point is to optimize the CBOs. So what we typically do is, say for example, we have a good CBO campaign that is scaling well, it's $100 a day and it's getting good quality leads and sales and phone calls booked, or whatever the end goal of the funnel is, then we can try and optimize these CBOs further. So for example, if in the CBO we had maybe like 3 lookalike audiences that were 1%, then I would create a new CBO at $100 a day and create the same lookalike audiences but at 2%. Or if the CBOs was all interests in the US, I would duplicate the CBO and maybe target the interests in Canada. So it's kind of like another version of this, but just at the CBO level. It's not a necessity to do that. If you've got enough flow from your testing and you've got enough good performing audiences, then you can just do it up until here and scale what has flown through here. But if you want to scale quicker, you want to spend more of your budget, then you can try this, where you actually just start optimizing what's working at the CBO and you don't send those ad sets through the testing phase. So a lot to cover, 60-minute video. I just wanted to give you an overview of our 4-step process. Like I said, we used this recently to scale to like from literally 0 to 20K a month in an ad set within 30 days. And it was super simple. This works. We've tested it on multiple different info product clients in all different niches. It works especially well if you're running ads for leads. So like VSL, like webinar funnels, stuff like that, because the auction here is really favorable for CBOs. So if you've got any questions, you can reply back to this. But yeah, that is the 4-part process that we use to scale ad accounts. I've been using this systematically for like the last 2 years, and it's not failed me yet. I'm not even joking. Like, as long as the offer is good and the copy is good, like, this doesn't scale. I've never tried to do this. I've never tried to scale using this formula and it not work. That's how effective it is.